On the night after my father's funeral, my husband, grinning, gleefully asked me the question, "Kay, how much is your stepfather's inheritance worth? The funeral just ended, you know, but we need to be clear about these things, right? Otherwise, it could lead to disputes later." "How much was it?" Mike kept pressing on, asking again and again. "Just so you know, it's not only me. My mother, me, and Alex are the inheritors." "Yeah, but I mean your share, Samantha." I wondered why he had to put it in such an unpleasant way. Thinking that he would find out soon anyway, I replied, "Dad put $300 million in a bank account for personal use." $300 million, huh? My husband cheerfully exclaimed, and I felt utterly disgusted. The following afternoon after the funeral, I received a call from Mike on my smartphone. He sounded quite troubled. "Why? How do I withdraw that money? Why do you ask?" I asked Mike coldly. "Sorry, but I was wondering if you could tell me." It seemed that Mike truly didn't know that spouses of inheritors don't have rights to the inheritance, which deeply disappointed me. My name is Samantha, a 55-year-old housewife. I have 2 children with my husband, Mike, who is the same age as me, a son named Alex, and a daughter named Ruby. I was born and raised in a typical salaryman's family. Went on to college in the usual manner, found a regular job, and then got married in the most ordinary way, being blessed with 2 children. My husband, Mike, and I met at work. I always thought I led a perfectly ordinary life. About 5 years ago, an illness was discovered in my father. He was 78 at the time. Though he was elderly, he had lived without any health issues or visits to the doctor up until that point. However, the disease that was suddenly discovered was severe. According to the doctor, surgery was not an option. However, due to his age, the progression of the disease might be slow. There was also a chance he might live out his natural lifespan if things go well. I've heard all about the illness. It doesn't seem like it's all that big of a deal when you really listen. I've been well up to this age, and from here on out, I'll just take it easy and wait for the time. My father said this in such a light-hearted manner that it left us, the family, utterly stunned. When I went home and reported to Mike, and he said, "How old is your father again?" 78. 78, huh? They say we're living in an age where people live up to 100. So it's not like he's particularly young. I mean, who knows when something might happen to my parents as well. I guess it can't be helped. His comments sounded rather indifferent. I thought his response was cold. But I wondered if I'd react the same way if something were to happen to my in-laws. So I refrained from saying anything. Then, 2 weeks later, my father told us he had something to discuss and wanted us all to gather. I'm good. It's about your parents, right? Though, well, he did say he wants you to come too. It's probably something he wants to talk about, or perhaps a request regarding your mother in case something happens. Though that might be the case. I'm not good with such somber matters. I'll stay at home that day. With that being said, I couldn't press any further. So I decided to visit my family home alone. Upon my arrival, my younger brother Alex and his wife, Amy, were already there. "Here's Mike. He said he wasn't feeling well, so he won't be attending today." I see. Without saying any more. Well, being in sales for a food company is a busy job. "It's okay to let him rest on his day off," he kindly said. I felt incredibly guilty towards my father. In reality, there was no particular reason. It was just a hassle to come. And then, the story my father began with was something astonishing. "What? How much? Can you say the amount again?" 1.1 billion. Hearing the amount again, all of us were just speechless with our eyes wide open. According to my father, 2 years ago, his uncle passed away. At that time, he inherited a little bit of legacy, and he used that money for something. And it was the cryptocurrency that was getting popular back then. Thinking it was just extra money I had, I invested all of it, and then. So it grew to that amount. More than the amount, the surprising thing was that my elderly father would even think of trying something like cryptocurrency. It was beyond my imagination. So, what did you do with it? Yeah, since the amount got so high, I decided to stop there. I pulled out all the money and converted it to cash. I was also surprised by that decision. I thought people who get into these kinds of investments, when they lose, they try to recover their losses, even going into debt. And those who profit, I thought they'd want to profit even more and continue. I guess I pulled out at a good time. After that, there were some problems that arose, but I managed to pull them out just before that happened. What an amazing luck! I'm astounded. I inadvertently blurted out my true feelings. My father laughed sheepishly. So, what exactly did you want to discuss today? Well, it's about dividing that inheritance. Please don't talk about such bad omens. We're living in an era where people live up to 100 years. It's too early for that kind of talk. When I said that, my father laughed. Well, I thought so too. But discussions like this should be done while we are still in good health. That might be true, but still. So, that's why I wanted to talk about this and call both of you and your partners here. I was surprised again at my father using the term partners. If something happens to me and suddenly such an amount of money comes before you, you might take the wrong path. Besides, you might not know how to discuss it with your partners, right? Alex and Amy exchanged troubled looks. So, I want you to be mentally prepared and think about how you'll use the money after you receive it. Wait, you're saying this after you put all of your granduncle's inheritance into cryptocurrency? Yes, that's right. Everyone burst into laughter at Alex's words. In my case, I was just really lucky. Knowing that, I want you all to handle it properly. That's why I decided to have this discussion. I fully understood my father's feelings. My brother, his wife, and I promised to do so. We dined with our parents and then decided to head home. Wait, inheritance. Was it such a good deal? I should have gone too. When I returned home and briefly explained the situation to Mike, he said that, surprised. That's rude. Calling inheritance a good deal. Well, isn't it? And it's quite a lot of money, right? How much do we get? I frowned at James' way of phrasing. I don't want to say. Hey, we're a married couple. We shouldn't have secrets. If you wanted to know, you should have come with me, right? Well, I was tired because of work. Besides, I didn't expect it to be such a good story. Good story. I unintentionally banged the table loudly. Are you saying it's a good story that my father has an incurable disease and that's why we're discussing inheritance? No, I'm sorry. Mike immediately apologized, perhaps realizing I was genuinely angry. But your father is still lively, right? You also said he wanted to talk about it while he was still healthy. That's true, but the doctor did say that if things go well, he could live a full lifespan. So, wasn't this a good opportunity for discussion? I thought he might have a point. But my distrust towards Mike didn't go away. Right. I think I'll try to understand your father's feelings and visit him again. However, watching Mike eagerly say that, my feeling of distrust began turning into discomfort. From then on, Mike started visiting my parents' home frequently. On weekends, whenever the kids and I mentioned going to my parents', Mike, who used to claim he'd be sleeping at home, now eagerly wanted to accompany us. Until one day, Ruby got angry and exclaimed, I don't want Dad to come anymore. That day, Ruby was planning to visit Grandpa, and Mike had expressed his wish to join. Or did Dad do something? According to Ruby, in the course of their conversation, Mike casually asked my father about the exact amount of the inheritance. And when my father responded, well, let's not get into that, Mike retorted with, but it seems like a substantial amount, right? I'd like to know too. Well, you'll find out when the time comes, so look forward to it. After saying that, Mom, what do you think he said? He said, I'm looking forward to that time, laughing. I can't believe he actually said that. Ruby had tears in her eyes, looking frustrated. I was at a loss for words. When I got angry about what he said, Grandma defended him, saying that Dad is an honest person. But that's not honesty, it's just rude. Just like my mother said, Mike is, in a way, an honest person. He says out loud whatever he thinks. He can't say things that are opposite to his feelings. He's a straightforward and good person. I used to think of him that way and liked that part of him when we were young. However, as we spend our lives together, I realized that not everything has only a good side. I'm the kind of person who can't keep secrets. They say honesty leads to loss, but if that's okay with you, I want us to be together. Those were Mike's words when he proposed. Unwittingly, I was touched back then. But that was just because he was insensitive and could hurt others. It wasn't that he was at a loss, but rather he was becoming disliked. I gradually realized that, but by the time I did, it was already too late. Don't let Dad near Grandpa anymore. I feel sorry for Grandpa. Hearing Ruby's tearful appeal, I felt the same way. Thus, deliberately, Mike only visited my parents' house on weekdays from then on. As time passed, our son and daughter, and also Alex's 2 daughters, got married one after another. I've witnessed all of my grandchildren's weddings. I have no more regrets. My father said that with joy. He lived fighting for 5 more years, and then he passed away. He was 83 years old. I had been prepared for 5 years before, but it was still a painful and sad goodbye. Hey, how much is your father-in-law's inheritance? That night, after my father's funeral, my husband Mike asked me that, grinning and laughing. The funeral just ended, you know, but if we don't clear up things like this now, it could lead to disputes later on. So, how much was it? Mike kept asking persistently again and again. Just so you know, it's not just me. Mom, me, and Alex are the 3 inheritors. Yay, I'm asking about your share, Samantha. What a distasteful way to phrase it. That's what I thought, but figured he'd find out soon anyway. Dad, set aside $300 million for me. $300 million, huh? My husband gleefully responded, making me feel deeply uncomfortable. The funeral ended smoothly. Today, my wife Amy and I will stay at my parents' house. You've been at the hospital for a while and must be exhausted, right? Alex and his wife decided to stay with our mother, so I returned to my own house. You must be tired too. Take a bath first and rest up today. Mike was considerate. Really, thank you. I'll rest first then. I left the cleaning to Mike and decided to go to bed early. The next morning, something happened. What is this? On the living room table, there was a single piece of paper. The divorce papers? Huh, it was a divorce document that Mike had signed and stamped. Which means, probably. I checked the bag I brought back yesterday and sighed. I knew it. The bank book with the $300 million that my father had left for me, along with the seal kept with it, was missing. Surely, Mike must have taken it. I had a feeling. Still, in the end, I wanted to trust the partner I had been with for many years. That's why I deliberately left everything to Alex and went to sleep first. How pathetic. I gave him one last chance. It was Mike who took advantage of that opportunity. I have no more compassion to give. I looked at the clock, and it was still 7 a.m. I finished my morning routine, waited for the right time, and started making moves. In the afternoon of the day after the funeral, I received a call on my smartphone from Mike. His voice sounded quite distressed. Hello, what do you want? Come, about that bank book. What about it? Surprised you couldn't withdraw the money? I coldly asked Mike. He is simple-minded. I intentionally left the bank book with a seal. I knew he would think that he could withdraw money using that seal. But that seal was a decoy. I purposely left a non-bank book seal with it. Furthermore, I wrote a 4-digit number inside the bank book. He probably thought it was the PIN. However, entering that number won't authenticate anything. Why? Because that number is my birthday. I don't know if he didn't remember my birthday, or if he thought my father set my birthday as the PIN. Either way, it doesn't matter. Mike, as I had predicted, believed it to be the PIN. With the seal and the PIN in hand, he must have gleefully headed to the bank. The thought is almost pitiful, making me want to laugh. Come, how do I withdraw the money? Why should I tell you that? Well, because I thought I'd take that money. Excuse me, I was astonished. He even admitted such a thing so naively. The way did you think you could have it? Well, we're a couple, so it should be ours, right? That's why I thought I'd give you the house and take this for myself. Bomb. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Unfortunately, you don't have the right to even a single cent of that money. What? The inherited money isn't considered shared property between spouses. So, it's solely mine. What the hell? I didn't hear about this. Mike was yelling from the other end of the phone. It seems like he genuinely didn't know that spouses don't have rights over inheritance. If one was thinking of inheriting an estate worth billions, no, that's not it. If he was thinking of swindling an inheritance worth billions, didn't he think he'd need some knowledge on the matter? While dreaming of such a naive adventure, I wish he'd at least studied a bit. He's so childlike in that aspect, and not in a good way. Such honesty, straightforwardness, and transparency show that he was originally a good person. Being honest, straightforward, without any deceit. He shouldn't have tried to swindle someone's inheritance. He couldn't stay true to himself until the end. That feels like the reason for Mike's downfall. As I listened to Mike yelling from the other end, I pondered these thoughts. Such a pitiable man. Key, are you listening? If you can hear me, say something. Hey, as I was lost in my thoughts, Mike, growing impatient with the lack of response, said with irritation, Ace, I'm listening. What were you saying? Key, were you always like this? We're married, aren't we? At least give me half, right? Please? Well, not half. Even 1/3 is okay. That's 100 million. I'll settle for 100 million. Isn't that fair enough? Mike pleaded in a pathetic voice. Why should I have to share the inheritance I received from my dear father with a husband I've left? What? I've submitted the divorce papers you left behind. We're strangers now. When I informed him of this, Mike seemed frozen on the other end of the line. You think you can just decide that on your own? Though what's so arbitrary about it? You signed and stamped it and left it behind. I just filled out my part and submitted it. Is there a problem? There is. A big problem. You shouldn't be submitting divorce papers just because you feel like it. I don't know where he is, but I wish he wouldn't shout such embarrassing things so loudly. It wasn't arbitrary. As I said before, we both agreed and signed the papers with the intention of getting a divorce. This is absurd. Who's being absurd here? In any case, could you come back? We need to discuss property division and other matters. So, you're going to share the inheritance. No. Upon hearing Mike's overly excited voice, I couldn't help but shout back in frustration. It's for the property division because of the divorce. It's about dividing this house, the shared assets you've spent, and everything else we own as a couple. Hearing this, Mike fell silent. I know about how you've been secretly spending our savings. Indeed, Mike had been stealthily withdrawing money from their savings account, which they had set aside for their retirement, for quite some time. I knew, but acted as if I didn't. About 5 years ago, around the time I heard about my father's inheritance, Mike changed. He started spending money freely. He took trips with his in-laws and often treated his colleagues lavishly. Each individual expense wasn't significant, but it seemed like he had removed the internal spending limiter he had set for himself. He bought whatever he desired and traveled wherever he wished, possibly due to his generous behavior. Even colleagues who once found him annoying began taking advantage of his generosity. Whether this made him happy or not, he continued his reckless spending spree. Whenever he was short on cash, he shamelessly withdrew from their joint account. He probably thought that once my father's inheritance was deposited, such petty expenses wouldn't matter. But that money was what I had been carefully saving for our retirement. His inability to appreciate the hard work that went into that savings and seeing it as just numbers made me nauseous. For the past 5 years, Mike had been living his days to the fullest, following his desires. With eyes sparkling, just like a child, his childish spending disillusioned me. I felt it would have been better if he'd just spent it on some woman. If you don't come back, I'll report to the police that our bank book and seal were stolen. Goodbye. After saying just that, I hung up the phone and even switched it off. Afterward, Mike obediently returned home. And in front of our children, he complied with the property division. Or rather, I made him comply. Mike apparently planned to retire early with my father's inheritance and travel the world. While dreaming big is free, I wanted him to achieve that with his own efforts. To realize his dream, Mike had submitted his resignation at his company. Although it was accepted and he received his severance pay, unfortunately for him, he couldn't receive the full amount. That's only natural, because he quit his job on a whim and without any proper notice. Furthermore, that amount was also subject to property division, so he couldn't even get all of it. Out of kindness, I decided to buy the house we were living in. Of course, I only paid half of its market value, equivalent to Mike's share. We had already finished paying off the mortgage, so all I had to do was hand over the money and change the ownership to complete the purchase. After deducting the amount Mike spent from our shared assets and taking half of his severance pay, he was left with hardly any money. Far from early retirement, he would now have to find another job just to support himself. Mike pleaded with tears in his eyes for another chance, but I had no intention of giving in. For these past 5 years, he had been eagerly awaiting the inheritance. He joyfully made all sorts of plans for that day, lining the bookshelf with travel books about voyages around the world. If he were a young boy, I might have fondly watched over such dreams. But these dreams were built upon the day my father would pass away, hollow dreams. I had no intention of hiding how I felt about that. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with someone who was eagerly counting down to such a day. All of this was brought about by Mike's own actions. For the rest of his life, I hope he finds new dreams to pursue. Dreams that don't involve me, just like before. We then divorced, and I sold the house we had lived in for so long. I did have some sentimental attachment to the house, but considering the possibility of Mike lurking around, I decided to sell it. I also had my mother and children relocate. You never know when Mike might come around seeking help. As a minimal line of communication, he only has our son Tim's phone number. Occasionally, he calls Tim in tears, but Goro just listens and hangs up. Tim requested a transfer at his company and now lives in a provincial city, making it nearly impossible for Mike to reach out to him for support. As for Ruby, her husband had always been self-employed and could work from anywhere, so they moved to a place they had always been interested in. Meanwhile, my mother and I bought a house near my daughter's family. Now, we occasionally take care of my granddaughter and my mother's great-granddaughter and lead a peaceful life. Speaking of the world trip Mike had always dreamt of, there's nothing stopping me from going, right? When I mentioned the idea of traveling, my mother said she wanted to go too. Perhaps the two of us could take a leisurely cruise together. Of course, we would bring a photo of my father with us, living a rich and fulfilling life in semi-retirement. For teaching me the possibility of such a wonderful future. I guess I have to be grateful to Mike for at least that.